Hello! Welcome back to another one of my videos. Today we are doing my May wrap-up. So, this month, let me just grab a sip. This month was not the best. I hoped for better. My birthday month let me down. But I still found some good books, and nothing that I really hated, just some disappointments. Starting off, I read A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I've been kind of on a binge with V.E. Schwab. I really like her writing style, and even though this one is very different from Vicious, I really did enjoy it. So, A Darker Shade of Magic is set in a London. There are 4 Londons, and they are all next to each other, kind of like how you can see on the cover here. There's one guy who can travel between them because he has a special kind of magic. And I guess because they were feared, they were all killed. Yeah. Our main character, so the guy who can jump between Londons, doesn't really remember who he is, but that's not even the main premise of the story, which I was a little sad about, but that's okay. So the main premise of the story is that basically, none of these Londons can communicate with each other. He is the only one who can bring letters from one side to another. No objects from one of the Londons can end up in the other one, otherwise it can be devastating, I guess. And of course, there is an object that ends up in a London and it shouldn't be there. So basically, the whole story I really liked. I liked the type of magic, even though it wasn't really explained, it didn't feel like it needed to be, because it was being used and because it was being shown, right? So I think that the magic is basically mostly elemental, but there are, I don't really know how to explain it. Like, it's elemental, but it's also kind of not. There's a test to find out, I guess, which one you have an affinity for more than the other. Then the world was pretty easy to understand. There was no explanation needed. It's London, and the guy who travels between them, differentiates them by color, right? So there's red London, there's gray London, black London, and white London. And you kind of picture them as they are, and the way they're described is they kind of look like that. So I really enjoyed this kind of comic book vibe that it had, which is kind of what Vicious had too. So it held a lot of that, but the characters were very different from Vicious. In these ones, the main character is kind of mysterious. Like, you don't really get to know him. You don't really know who he is. You neither like him nor dislike him. So I kind of enjoyed that because he himself doesn't really know who he is, so makes sense. Then you've got another character who gets pulled in. I enjoyed her. She was very stubborn, very, knows what she wants. So overall, I like this book for the story that it had. The characters were meh for me. Like, I didn't like them or dislike them. I didn't think they were overly interesting or uninteresting. Again, I wasn't super wowed by this book, but I did give it a 4-star. I enjoyed it. While I was reading A Darker Shade of Magic, the audiobook I was listening to was The audiobook I was listening to was Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman, which I love mythology, and this one was really quick and really easy to listen to. So it was just a nice book to listen to. I enjoyed it. I liked how Neil Gaiman kind of gave each god their own personality in a way, which they do in the mythology as well. But what really made his exceptional to me, what made me smile a lot, and what made me feel like these gods are not only gods in a mythology but also characters in a story, was the dialogues that he had between them sometimes. Where an example would be like Loki going to ask Freya for her, for her cloak of feathers or something like that, and she just blatantly says no, and then he tries to explain why he needs it, and she's like, oh yeah, okay, never mind, take it. Like there were just moments like that that I really enjoyed and made me smile. So if you want to read or listen to a very easy Norse mythology book that will give you the point A to point B story, because the good thing is Norse mythology is very linear, so it's not too hard to keep track of. I highly recommend his. It outlines the most important parts in Norse mythology and highlights the important gods and what they rule over and how they acquired many of their powers and many of their rankings and things like that. So I enjoyed his version of it. After that, I actually listened mostly to this book, The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. I thought this book was decent. I didn't love it, but I also didn't hate it. I didn't have any qualms with it. I think it's very well written. And the story was good. I don't know how else to really describe it. You are following a woman who has agoraphobia. She stays in her home. The reason why she has agoraphobia, why she has developed it, is slowly explained throughout the book, more like comes to light in a way, and she is narrating this story. So I definitely wouldn't say this is an unreliable narrator type of story, but it has a lot of those feelings of it, and even she herself doesn't really trust herself to be saying or seeing the truth. I really did enjoy it from that aspect, but I didn't feel, I don't know, I guess I didn't feel, throughout the book, I didn't really feel much of anything. I really did like the perspective that it took, though. I really enjoyed the main character's like monologues with herself, talking to herself, and the way she would go back and forth, and also kind of the slow progression of what happened to her. I mostly was interested in that. I wasn't so interested in the mystery, I guess, that is in the book. Also, the ending I really wasn't a fan of. It wasn't a bad one. It just also was one that I don't know, I guess I wanted something better, which I guess is terrible to say, but yeah, the ending to me didn't feel right for the book, I guess. I don't know, let me know what you think. After that book, I did borrow the physical book and the audiobook of The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I didn't like this book. I didn't finish it. So this is my one DNF of the month. I really thought I was going to like it, but I ended up not hooking with it at all. So yeah, sorry for the Ocean at the End of the Lane fans. It wasn't for me. I tried. I really did. I got up to like halfway to the book. I got to 50% of the audiobook. I ended up not even reading the physical book, just listening to the audiobook, because I couldn't even find the strength to pick up the physical book. And when I was reading the audiobook, I kept on going back to listen again, and I would just constantly do it and get nowhere, and it was just frustrating me to no end. I think the main reason I couldn't hook with it was because the story, the premise of the book sounded really interesting, and as I was listening, I was really trying to get into it, but I couldn't because the way it was being told, I think I didn't like. The whole story is being told from a young boy's point of view, and I couldn't relate to him. I didn't enjoy any of the other characters either, and it just got really creepy at times, like really weird. So yeah, I didn't vibe with that book. Sorry. Next, I read The Bone Maker by Sarah Beth Durst. I was so disappointed by this book. So the story is in Voss, this country or place, I don't know. In Voss, there are magicians, specifically bone magicians, and that's the only kind of magic that exists. What happened in this book, though, is that there was a war with this one bone maker who I guess was wronged in some way and created an army and attacked Voss. There are 5 warriors who defeated him. Now, this is 25 years later, where these 5 warriors are coming to the realization that maybe they didn't win the war. So this sounds like a really good book. I would have probably really loved it if if it had done a better job with multiple different things. One, world building. Could have benefited a lot from world building, because all I can tell you is Voss and bone magic, and there are some creatures in some place that I can't even tell you if it's a valley or a forest, because all I know is that there's mist, apparently. I also know that bone magic is the only thing. I don't know how it came to be. I don't know why there isn't other magic. I don't know how this council thing came to be either. Like, there's just a bunch of things that I think it could have really benefited from for a book that is so fantasy oriented, and it's a pretty big book. Like, it could have spent some time delving into the world building, but it didn't. Then there's also the characters. I didn't really like any of them. I didn't hate any of them either. So it's the 5 warriors. They're all supposed to be buddies, and it's 25 years later, and they're all rallying up together again. And don't get me wrong, like, their dialogues together, they were a blast. I had a lot of fun just reading the dialogues and the dynamic between them. It was fun. Like, I had flashbacks to Avengers movies when they're having a conversation in the middle of a fist fight. Like, I got a lot of that from this. But you don't really get a lot of development from them, and it's kind of like you're just supposed to accept that they are who they are in their friendship group hierarchy thing. Like, the main character is supposed to be their leader, and I can't accept that. I can't. They need to give me, like, Sarah Beth Durst needs to give me a better reason why she was their leader, because I don't know. It kind of just seemed like it was pulled out of nowhere. A lot of this book felt like it was pulled out of nowhere. A lot of this book felt like it needed more time to figure out more details. I would have enjoyed it a lot more if it had done that. So, a little disappointed in this one. After The Bone Maker, I read my book club book for my local library. For this month, it was 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. Now, the main reason I really liked this book was because I couldn't put it down. And when I went with my book club group, like, we all agreed that we read it really quickly, and we didn't really, like, we didn't love the book, but for some reason we couldn't put it down. So for that, I gave the book like 4.5 stars, because I think that any book that can make you keep reading it and keep turning pages, even though you're not, like, fascinated by it, it's a good book. It means it's well written. So I did like it for that. I think that there were a bunch of interesting pieces to it, and I don't want to talk about it too much because I feel like I'm going to end up doing some spoilers. But yeah, it was good. I liked it. It was a thriller, and I was actually pretty thrilled by it. And the ending was, I didn't expect it. There were a lot of things that I didn't expect, except one thing. I knew who the killer was. I went to my book club and they were just like, you knew who it was? I was like, yeah, the moment that character came into the story, I knew that was the killer. And they all asked me how, and I was like, I think it was just the convenience of it kind of pointed me toward it. But yeah, I did enjoy A Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. I would recommend it for anyone who does want an unreliable narrator and who wants a interesting twist at the end. All right, then I listened to the audiobook for The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I know I have the physical book, but I ended up just listening to it. This book was interesting. I had watched the movie a long time ago, didn't remember anything from it, and decided that I wanted to read the book. I will say this book felt like it was, I keep having a hard time finding the words for this one, but it felt like it was almost an actual cop writing it, even though it's not even written from the point of view of a cop. Like, all the information that was given to you felt like I was being handed a document with precise time, place, what happened. Like, it felt like that, but it wasn't boring. So yeah, I thought that was really well done. I also think that the characters were like, this is not a character driven story. In my opinion, it's not character driven. It is very much plot driven. And I think that the characters were just very important. Each of them had their own importance in it, and it benefited the story greatly. And the pace of it was really nice. The twist I did not expect, which I don't even know if people consider it a twist, but I didn't expect it at all. I would also say, trigger warnings, there is a lot of sexual harassment in here, some rape, things like that. Definitely beware of that. But if you want a book that feels very much like a crime investigation novel, this is a good one. And I personally wouldn't call myself someone who reads a lot of or appreciates crime investigation novels, but I enjoyed this one. It was well written. I liked it, and I will be continuing the series. I also finished Urban Trauma. I'm not going to talk too much about this one because I have made multiple videos on it already, so we're just going to kind of talk quickly about it. Urban Trauma by, what is her name again? Meza Akbar. Talks about racism. Also mostly talks about racism in urban settings and how that experience can actually be very traumatic, as well as the added on trauma of previous history of Black Americans. This book is very strong. I would say if you want to educate yourself on these topics, this is a good book to pick up, but beware, it is probably going to make you very angry and pretty eye-opening. So yeah. Last thing on this though is that I think that it wasn't written as well as it could have been. By that I mean it often seemed to jump some ideas that I would have wanted more on, like more examples, more detail, things like that. So really great book, could have been better written, could have been a little bit longer. I mean, let's face it, it's not like racism is this short of a problem or this small of a problem in our country. So I do think it could have benefited from a little bit more through it, but I think that because it's so small, it's also very accessible. So if you can get it, get it. All right, next book. I also read The Near Witch by V.E. Schwab. See, I told you I was on a V.E. Schwab binge. This book, I liked it. So this book is a YA. I personally feel like it'd almost be like a younger, like between middle grade and YA, although it is a pretty dark book, or it has a dark atmosphere, and I love that. So this entire book, I just kind of pictured it being in like a cloudy, always misty, always bad weather, little hamlet town in like some countryside of England. Like that's kind of what I saw for it. On top of the fact that it's a story about witches, or yeah, basically it is a story about witches. So what you have is a main character who lives in the town of Near, and in this town they're used to witches, but there seems to be this weird dynamic where it's like they know that witches exist, but they don't want to accept that witches exist, so magic isn't really a thing. So that was interesting. That kind of like denial type of atmosphere or like-mindedness of the town was very interesting, especially since they have two witches who live in town. But this protagonist, she is trying to meet a stranger who comes to her town, which that never happens. On top of that, there are kids who are disappearing, so she's also trying to figure out if the stranger is abducting the kids or if something else is at play. I did really enjoy this book. What brought it down for me was the relationship in it. I don't even want to call it romance because it wasn't really romance in my book, but it was a relationship that popped out of nowhere, and I'm someone who already isn't a huge romance reader. I don't really like love stories unless they're very realistic. But this one didn't feel realistic at all. It just kind of felt like, oh, hey, boy, girl, let's just put y'all together and y'all trust each other wholeheartedly, but you barely know each other. But it's fine because it's a small town, right? That's what it felt like a lot, and I did not like that. But the story was really good, so I gave this book 4 stars because it was really well written and because the characters were quite interesting, except for her mom. I had issues with the mom. If you want to know more about my thoughts on The Near Witch, you can check out my vlog. All right, final book of the month. Whoa, we're getting through it. Ugh. Final book of the month I read. Final book of the month? Yeah, final book that I read this month. The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. This was another book that I was disappointed by, but this one I was way more disappointed in it than I was with any of my other ones from this month because I expected like a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of magic, a little bit of you know, I don't know, just something more. But this ended up really just being historical fiction mixed in with a life crisis story, basically. So at first I was like, ooh, this is maybe going to be a story where the girl in present day discovers the woman in the past who did all these poisons, and maybe she's going to find a poison. Like, I was expecting something pretty intriguing, like almost like a mystery fantasy type of novel. Or a mystery fiction, I don't know, something interesting, right? This wasn't interesting. This was basically about 2 women in 2 different times who were both going through their own crisis in life, and nothing happens. And if something does happen, it is glossed over so quickly and jumps right back into an inner monologue of how life sucks for them or how difficult it is to do things, that I lost interest. As I kept reading this book, it's short, so I read the whole thing, but by the end of it, I was just like, why am I even reading this anymore? On top of that, there is a moment in this book, or rather multiple moments in this book, where the problem could have been easily solved if only they had communicated. And I hate when that happens in books. I hate it when the book is like, oh, should I tell them the truth? Oh, but if I do, this might happen. Like, just say it and you will have no problems. But no, they don't say it, and then it ends up being a whole tangle of a thing. Like, it feels like wasted time. Every time a book does that, I'm like, okay, you're just trying to like drag your book on a little bit longer. So yeah, this book basically really annoyed me. I was hoping for more. I was really interested in what would happen. There's technically a twist at the end, but it wasn't even a twist I enjoyed because it was a character that I didn't like, a character that I genuinely feel like shouldn't have been in the book. But again, she was the only character who actually did anything, so the book would have been terrible without her, but I didn't like her, so yeah. This was an interesting book for me to end the month with, but that was the last one. So May was not the best. I'm hoping for better in June. So yeah, that's it for me for today. I hope you enjoyed this wrap up. Let me know what books you read in the month and what you think about the books I read this month. As always, if you like this video, feel free to like and subscribe down below. I have more links as well if you want to check me out there. I do have affiliate links for these books, not through Amazon because I try not to buy my books through Amazon unless I really can't find them anywhere else. They are for bookshop.org, which actually supports local bookstores in your area. So if you would like to buy these books for yourself, please check those out down below. And that's it for me. I will see you next time. Bye! I think my stomach grumbled at the end there. I really hope it didn't go in the video.